high school sweethearts Lisa Caldwell and Seth Techel finally marry after 7 years of dating in a beautiful, old-fashioned church ceremony. Within months of getting married, they learned that they're expecting a baby girl. But before Seth and Lisa can celebrate their 1-year anniversary or the birth of their baby, one of them will be dead. Hello and welcome to The Dark Side of Love. I am your host, Bianca Sloan, author of suspense novels about the dark side of love. And this week I'm putting a spotlight on the case I'm calling Nothing to Lose. Lisa Marie Caldwell, named for Elvis's daughter Lisa Marie Presley, was born May 7, 1989, one of 4 kids to Todd and Tracy Caldwell of Ottumwa, Iowa. Lisa's dad, Todd, told Dateline that his daughter, with her blonde hair and friendly blue eyes, was considered the life of the party, known to be energetic and competitive, especially when it came to bowling, which she excelled at. Todd said of his daughter, quote, anything she did, she had to be the best at it. Among the things that Lisa was champion at was hunting, fishing, and even shooting. While a student at Ottumwa High School, Lisa met Seth Techel, who was, I guess you could say, Ottumwa royalty of sorts, as his grandfather, Dale Ewing, was a former mayor of the town. His mom was a social worker, and his dad owned the local bowling alley, which was a favorite around town, so everyone knows the Techels. Seth presented as the all-American boy, clean-cut, church-going, a kid who performed relief work during disasters, and someone who enjoyed family time and hanging out with his buddies. Bowling is what initially brought Seth and Lisa together because he worked at his dad's bowling alley part-time, as did she when she wasn't there bowling, because remember, she's a champion bowler. And so this is how the couple first met and fell in love. And they remained bound together by their love of bowling, as well as hunting and fishing and shooting, which, remember, Lisa's really good at. And in fact, Seth's friends told Dateline that Lisa was much better at those things than Seth. And despite all of that, they become the perfect match. Of course, when you are in a long-term relationship with anyone, I don't care how old you are, people always want to know, when are you getting married? And Seth and Lisa are no different. Seth's friends told Dateline that Seth was lucky to have Lisa, and it seemed that he agreed, because after 7 years of dating, he decided that it was time for he and Lisa to make it official. But first, because Seth is a respectful and responsible young man with traditional values, he actually went to Lisa's dad and stepmom Amy to ask them for their permission to marry his longtime girlfriend, and they happily agreed. And so, with permission granted and engagement done, 22-year-old Lisa and 21-year-old Seth got married on October 15, 2011 in an old-fashioned church ceremony. Lisa's sister Presley, as in, yes, Elvis Presley, told Dateline that she considered Seth to be a best friend, and Lisa's dad, Todd, also told the program that Seth would call him Dad, and that I love you was a regular part of their vocabulary with each other, with Todd saying, quote, I felt as close to him as I did my own son. So Lisa, whose father was a deputy with the Wapello County Sheriff's Office, decided to follow in her father's footsteps and chose a career in law enforcement. She had attended Indian Hills Community College and Buena Vista University, eventually earning a degree in criminal justice with a minor in psychology. She interned with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigations, was a correctional officer in nearby Washington County, and, as if that's not all enough, was in the Wapello County Sheriff's Reserve. So she is quite serious about this as her career. And Seth, for his part, he was a volunteer firefighter and a security guard, and his father-in-law Todd was helping him become a jailer at the local jail. So Seth and Lisa are married, they're in love, they're building really good careers, and it seems like everything is just falling into place for them because as a wedding gift, for example, Seth's parents bought them a trailer, and the couple settled on a plot of land in Agency, Iowa, with a plan to save money and eventually build a home of their own. And then, because everything's not perfect enough, Lisa finds out that she is pregnant. So this is just like everything's coming up roses. All the dominoes are falling into place. Everything's perfect. May 26th, 2012. Memorial Day weekend. Lisa is 17 weeks pregnant with a little girl that she plans to name Zoe Maria. She and Seth at this point have been married about 7 months. It's early, 5 a.m. Lisa is asleep. Seth is in the shower, getting ready for work. Suddenly, the horrifying sound of a shotgun blasts through the early morning quiet. The sound of this shotgun propels Seth out of the shower and straight to his wife's side. He finds Lisa covered in blood, moaning. Seth doesn't see anyone in the trailer, but he hears a noise from the direction of the back deck. He grabs his handgun, which is on the nightstand, and he bolts outside. Except there's nobody there. He runs back inside to Lisa, asks if she's okay. She's not breathing. A frantic, incoherent Seth calls 911 to report that his pregnant wife of less than a year has been shot. The lone deputy on duty races to the scene to find Seth sobbing outside of the trailer. A paramedic is already there, frantically working on Lisa and her unborn baby. Lisa has been shot in her side, and it doesn't look good. Lisa's father, who again is a deputy with the sheriff's office there locally, he is called to the scene, and he and his wife, Amy, that's Lisa's stepmom, she's an ER nurse, so they both bolt for the trailer, thinking what can they do to help, what's going on, having to know what's going on with Lisa, with their daughter. But it's too late. Lisa and her unborn baby are gone. Lisa Techel was 23 years old. Everyone is absolutely gutted by this. Seth is wandering around outside, no shirt, no shoes, just wailing, totally inconsolable. Body cam footage shows him punching the back of his pickup truck, seemingly trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. Lisa's dad, Todd, he immediately fingers a suspect. He believes that the culprit is Seth and Lisa's neighbor, a man by the name of Brian Tate. So apparently, Brian, who was a disabled vet, had been in a neighborhood war of sorts with Lisa and Seth. Well, Seth anyway. And it had all started about 2 months prior to the murder when Seth was coming home one day and there was a dead deer in the road. He pulled it off the road and he put it right on the property line between his and Lisa's property and Brian's. I don't know if he was going to bury it or call animal control or what his plan was, but Brian was not having it. So he throws this dead deer onto Seth and Lisa's property. So what follows is a game of hot potato with this poor dead deer, as Seth and Brian take turns throwing this carcass back and forth between their two properties. I mean, if this isn't the definition of a pissing match, I don't know what is. But Brian, for his part, he calls the county repeatedly to report acts of vandalism, including rocks being thrown at his house, at his garage, and dog poop also being thrown at his house. And he believes that all of this is being perpetrated by Lisa and Seth. Well, I guess Seth anyway. And Lisa's dad, Todd, actually catches one of the calls that Brian makes. And he goes out to pay Brian a visit, find out what's going on. But he doesn't let Brian know that he is related to Seth and Lisa. And he says, listen, they're good kids. If there is anything that happens, you let us handle it. You let us deal with it. Brian's response is, quote, what if I'm the one who's got to catch him? Okay, so that doesn't sound too good. And according to what Todd told Dateline, Brian even went so far as to describe what had happened as, quote, acts of terrorism. Making this even more unsettling is that Brian does keep a loaded shotgun by his side, so Todd really can't be sure what this guy is going to do. Adding to the unease was the fact that Brian was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. 11 days before Lisa's murder, Brian makes another call to the sheriff's office, complaining that the vandalism to his property is getting worse. So it feels like a line of sorts has been drawn in the sand, and everyone is kind of on edge where Brian and this situation is concerned. It feels like a powder keg waiting to explode. And now, with Lisa having been brutally murdered, it seems as though that explosion did indeed happen. And now, all eyes turn to Brian Tate. So officers pay him a visit, and they are, of course, unsure about what they're going to encounter. So they load up all of their tactical gear. They are, head to toe, ready to go, ready for any situation that they may run into when they get there. Because this is a small town, Agency, Iowa. And like so many small towns, brutal murders just don't happen here. So everyone is on high alert. And in fact, there hadn't been a murder in Agency for 15 years. So the pressure is really on to solve this quickly with no violence and allow everybody to feel safe and move on. So with all of this in mind, officers approach Brian's house ready for anything. Except Brian could not have been more lovely. He's calm, he's collected, he offers them chairs. He is, in a word, unbothered. Brian's alibi is that he went to sleep the night before around 8:30 and slept until about 11 the next morning. So that's about 15 hours. And as a result, he says, clearly I slept through what happened. So while Brian is still suspect number one, cops do still have to rule out Seth because he is the husband. And we know you always have to look at the husband. And Seth wants to be cleared ASAP. So he makes an appointment to be interviewed by deputies. And as his parents told Dateline, he insisted to them, quote, "No lawyers. I didn't do anything. I have nothing to hide." So he sounds pretty adamant about this. Seth heads downtown for his interview, which everyone thinks will be routine. A total formality. Nothing to see here, folks. We already know who murdered Lisa. Seth lays out what happened, how he was in the shower, heard a gunshot, and he ran out to see what was going on. He's asked during that interview who he thinks broke into his house and murdered his wife. Seth is clear. He believes, without a doubt, it was Brian Tate. Or as he called him, quote, "my crazy-ass neighbor who thinks that we're terrorists." Well, tell us how you really feel. Seth is asked point blank if either he or Lisa were stepping outside of the marriage, and once again, Seth is clear, adamant, that no, nobody was cheating on anybody. Okay. Now, there is no way that Seth could know this, but he is about to be exposed as a bold-faced liar. As it happens, while Seth is sitting for his interview, his friend Colton came by the house, which is a crime scene, remember, so it's crawling with cops, crawling with investigators, because he had a puppy there that Seth and Lisa were watching for him, like boarding him, I guess. And investigators are like, "Oh, well, since you're here, tell us some things, answer a few questions for us." And it comes out during the course of this conversation that Seth has a burner phone. Now, why, oh, why would a husband need a burner phone unless he had, wait for it, a girlfriend? Yes. If that was your guess, you guessed exactly right. You're getting the prize. Okay. Now, being a cheater does not make you a murderer, but it also doesn't make you look very good either. So deputies on the scene correctly say, you know what? This is huge. This is major. This could be a pretty big factor in this investigation. We need to let the investigators who are interviewing Seth know about this because he's not under arrest. So it's possible that he could walk out of there, no skin on his nose. So these deputies, they start texting the investigators who are interviewing Seth saying, hey, he's got a burner phone. Hey, he's got a girlfriend. And before the investigators who are questioning Seth can bring this up, Seth, who, remember, he's going for a career in law enforcement, he probably sees the phone like pinging with text messages, and even though he may not know what's going on, his antenna goes up, and he decides, you know what, I'm going to go on the offensive. And he says, well, actually, there is this girl that you should know about. So the girl, her name is Rachel McFarland, and Seth and Rachel work together. And at first, Seth downplays their relationship, saying it's a casual, good morning, how are you type of thing. And then he says that Lisa found out about it, but she was totally fine with it, totally cool with it. Sure, she was. And then he says, well, we didn't have sex. There was no sexting. There's no photos, nothing at all like that. It was totally chaste. All I did was kiss and hug her, like make out a little bit, but that's it. Well, no, that wasn't it. Of course it wasn't. For one, Rachel had sent Seth some topless photos of herself, and Seth, in his infinite wisdom, showed them to his buddy Colton, who, remember, is the one at the scene spilling the tea about this relationship that Seth is having with Rachel. It's like, anyway, I don't even have words. I never have words. So the agents who were questioning Seth, they come clean with him and they say, look, we've been talking to your buddy Colton and he knows about you and Rachel, right? Seth admits that yes, Colton does know about Rachel. And then he says, well, funny enough, Rachel, somehow, I don't know how, but somehow, she got the impression that Lisa was planning to pack up and leave, and that Lisa and I were getting a divorce. Gosh, Seth, I wonder where she could have got that idea from. Gee, it's a mystery. Okay, so here's where Seth really starts putting on a show. I mean, even more than he has been. Because he says, well, yeah, I know, it was wrong to string Rachel along, and I was only lying, though, because I didn't want Todd, that's Lisa's father-in-law, to find out what I'd been up to. I wanted to spare his feelings, you see. Oh, gosh, Seth, you are a prince. Now, while the agents questioning Seth have been playing nice guy, outside of the station, Seth's parents and lawyer that they've gone ahead and decided to retain, even though Seth told them, no lawyers, I'm innocent, I didn't do anything, they are all outside at the station, which is closed because it's after hours, and they're quite literally banging on the door to get in because they want to shut this interview down. And investigators, aware that the clock is ticking, decide, we're going for the jugular. And the jugular is, dude, we know that you had something to do with the murder of your wife. Seth's response, in my opinion, which I have lots of opinions, but it's weird. Because the first thing he says is, quote, I can't kill my wife. It's like he's trying too hard to convince them, or I don't know. It's off. It's an off response. So now Seth does not blow his top, but he does get agitated at the accusation that, he had something to do with Lisa's murder, and he decides he's had enough, and he's leaving. And as he's leaving, he shakes the guy's hand who's been interrogating him like they're old pals. Like they just spent 4 hours on their fantasy football picks or something. I don't know. It's just, again, it's weird. It's really weird. So the net result of all of this, though, is that there are no arrests made in Lisa's murder, which means cops have to keep digging for answers and evidence. One thing that investigators are desperate to find is the murder weapon, which they believe is a 12-gauge shotgun that belongs to Seth's friend Lucas, who was staying with Seth and Lisa. When Lucas moved out, he left the gun behind, and when investigators were processing the scene, they couldn't find it. So first question is, well, where is it? Well, the cops do find it. It's the day after Lisa's murder, in fact, so it didn't take long. And they don't have to go far either to find it because it is nestled in the overgrown grass of Seth and Lisa's property, mere feet from their back door. And sure enough, when investigators run ballistics tests on the shotgun and the bullets recovered from Lisa's body, spot on match. So this seems to bolster the belief that Seth is the murderer rather than Brian, the neighbor, or some other random intruder because Seth had access to the gun. And if someone is coming in randomly with the intent to kill Lisa, wouldn't they bring their own weapon with them? Like they're just betting maybe on the fact that there's going to be a gun, but they don't know for sure. Yeah, makes no sense. But the answer is yes, they would bring their own weapon because of course they would. The time has now come to interview Seth's, I don't know if you call her girlfriend, friend girl, Rachel. Anyway, they bring in Rachel, and she corroborates that while the relationship was not consummated, it was sexually explicit, and that Seth would tell her that he loved her and wanted to be with her. So investigators start to believe more and more that Seth is their guy, that he wanted to be with Rachel, and that Lisa and their unborn child were in the way. Authorities decide it's time to make their move, and at the end of Lisa's memorial service, they arrest Seth and charge him with first-degree murder and non-consensual termination of a pregnancy. Seth pleads guilty and stays in jail until his trial begins. His trial is scheduled for February of 2013, and there are a few revelations that come out. So for one, the vandalism to Brian Tate's property, which, that's the rock throwing and the feces, Seth put one of his friends up to it. So that speaks to premeditation. And it kind of also, it's sad to me and sick at the same time, because we know that Brian Tate is suffering from mental illness. And so Seth knows this, and he just decides he's going to pin what he's about to do to Lisa on this poor guy, because he's like figuring clearly, well, who are you going to believe, me or the quote crazy ass neighbor? Again, that was what Seth said in his interrogation. That's what he called Brian. Then there was the relationship with Rachel. So Seth and Lisa got married in October of 2011, and a mere 2 months after the wedding, he's wooing Rachel. Days before Lisa's murder, Rachel testified that she and Seth met up, and he lays it on thick, telling her exactly what she wanted, that it just wasn't working out with him and Lisa, that he was going to divorce her, that he only loved Rachel. He even went so far as to send Rachel a text message on May 24th, this is 2 days before Lisa's murder, that said, "Wish me luck." Rachel testified that she believed it was Seth's intention that he was going to ask Lisa for a divorce. Now, Rachel, mindful of the fact that Seth is a married man, she says, well, as it happens, there is another guy that I'm interested in, one who is actually available. So this makes Seth panic, because he's thinking he's about to get, the girl he wants, and she's going to go off with another guy. And he's like, well, I can't let that happen. So he says to Rachel, quote, "Just give me 2 more weeks." Give him 2 weeks. I'm sorry. It's giving Scott and Lacey Peterson. Just as a refresher, Scott was dating Amber Fry and told her before Lacey, his wife, disappeared, that he'd lost his wife and it would be his first Christmas without her. Except Lacey is alive and well. Okay. I'm just saying it's giving Scott and Lacey. But at any rate, the jury cannot come to a consensus about Seth's guilt, and a mistrial is declared. Prosecutors waste no time filing a new case against Seth, which takes place 7 months later in October of 2013 in a new courthouse. Aside from the change of venue, the first trial was a virtual repeat of trial number 1, including a deadlocked jury and another mistrial. Once again, prosecutors decide to try Seth a third time. So, Seth's third trial sees a new defense team and yet another new venue. This time around, prosecutors put a co-worker of Seth's on the stand who testified that he said to Seth, "Dude, either end things with Rachel or divorce your wife. Like, quit trying to have your cake and eating it too." That same friend said that Seth's response was, quote, "Do you want to pay my child support?" Same friend went on to testify that Seth told him about Lisa, quote, "It would be better off if she was in a car wreck and died." Oh, jeez. Horrible. Seth's new defense team takes the tack of exposing what they termed as sloppy police work by investigators, including not testing Seth's hands for gunshot residue, nor in investigating Lisa more closely. Turns out while Seth was having, let's say, an aspirational affair with Rachel McFarland, Lisa was having an actual affair with one of her coworkers, Jason Tennis, who was married with 4 kids and who thought he might have been the father of Lisa's unborn baby. Well, he testifies that he and Lisa began a sexual relationship prior to her marriage to Seth, and that it continued, he said, pretty much the entire time that she was married, up until a few weeks before she was murdered. Despite all of the revelations, the exposure of the careless police work, the third time was the charm, as the jury found Seth guilty of first-degree murder and the non-consensual termination of a pregnancy. Seth was sentenced to life in prison, no possibility of parole. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of The Dark Side of Love. I am your host, Bianca Sloan, and show your love for The Dark Side of Love by visiting thedarksideoflove.com for show notes and transcripts. While you're there, sign up for my newsletter to be notified about new episodes. And you can also find a link to my Patreon page where you can access bonus material and other fun stuff. Learn more about my suspense novels about the dark side of love by visiting biancasloan.com. Thanks for hanging out with me, and join me next time for another tale of love gone wrong. I'll see you on the dark side.